Well, hello there, everyone. Sorry, Christy here. I am still setting up. My life is very confusing right now. How are you doing? Good morning to you all. I hope you can hear me all right. My stream suggestion was telling me that my audio stream's bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. So can you guys let me know if you can hear me okay in the chat? I'll just go ahead and pop out the live chat and change my window so you can see which one you're looking at. Right. That should be this one. Now you guys should be able to see yourself. How are you doing? How are things? Can you hear me all right? Oh, okay, there's some gaming related drama. I got a good morning in the chat. Okay, so my audio can't be that bad. You can hear me. There's no music. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I did have music playing. Actually, the music's still playing. So I'm going to turn that off. Thank you for the reminder, Mithril. Appreciate that. What a disaster. First show after, well, I'm still on holiday. So I'm just going to chalk all this up to me being rubbish. So guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. It is good to be back. Hello, hello, hello. So welcome to 2020. And we've got some, like I said, some gaming related agony going on from DNF fan in the chat. Some stress stuff, which when you told me, you said in the chat you had this horrible day, I was thinking like traffic jams or something, like that. But it's mainly obstacles. It looks like some gaming related stuff. So sorry for the boring non-music part. Sorry for the slightly late start. I needed to make some coffee. Cut down there. Also, I guess I can get the OBS thing off the screen. You guys don't really need to see that. And let's talk about what I'm going to talk about. So I've been on holiday for most of the last week, which has been lovely. But multiple images of me. That's weird. There's multiple images of me. Let's see. Okay, so there's a transition. This is interesting. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to this one. That's no images of me. And this should just be just the one image. I'll move myself over. Yeah, what is that weird thing in the bottom of the screen? Oh, right, okay. Well, that should just be the fireplace and kitty. So let's see if that helps at all. Might be some wonky update with OBS. So now you can tell me if there's more than one me. Although now I'm looking weirdly off into like the corner of the screen, off into nothing. So I think I'd rather move things around and be able to see you guys. So I'll do that instead. What a nightmare. I hope you guys don't come for a professional show, because clearly that's not what you're getting today. Okay. That was OBS. It's fine. All right. So things I want to talk about today. One, it's going to be a bit of a shorter show. My guest, as you guys might have heard from the live show, I have the Cognitive Society here. He's doing some research stuff in the area. We went and checked out the National Socialist Museum, which was fascinating. I can talk about that maybe toward the end of the hour if you guys want to hear a bit more about that. And also, to meet up with Mike Suchberry, which if you guys are following me on Twitter, you might have seen me retweet out a picture from that yesterday, and generally having a good time, but it's also his last day. So I'm going to do a shorter show in order to be a good hostess, go out, have some Cologne food, have maybe a bit more Cologne beer, get him to the airport on time, get everything sorted. So yes, a shorter show this week. However, I'm on holiday for the remainder of this week, and I would really like I'm going to talk to Kevin about doing a happy hour tomorrow night probably, because tonight would just be a little too pressed with getting my guest to the airport in case the flight is delayed in any meaningful way, and kind of get back into the swing of things for 2020. But what I did want to talk about, I guess on a more serious note, we'll call it, is the events going on in Iran. Now, I want to kind of just put up my hands to say my expertise is not in international relations. That's I used to, actually, my undergraduate degree, I did quite a lot of international relations study, but that was a long time ago. However, there's some fundamental principles related to international relations that might still be somewhat interesting, and that we can discuss just in terms of analysis, things that I've been looking at online. And then I thought I would, okay, this isn't where's my bookmarks? Here's my bookmarks. As you guys might know, there's sort of a controversy, you call it, with ContraPoints, and she's made a video about cancel culture. A lot of people are reacting to that. A lot of people have takes on that, and I don't want to talk about that too much, mostly because I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I've been busy in my real life with stuff, so I haven't had the hour and 40 some minutes to sit down. I have seen lots of people reacting to it, and I want to just talk a little bit about why I don't think I will do that much reacting to it on that topic. So that was basically that and what you guys put in the chat. So you guys are having a nice little back and forth. Staff issues. Okay, you guys are like, yeah, having a little back and forth in the chat about your lives. That's good, because I like the fact that in some ways people who come here on the regular have formed interactions, here in my chat room, and that actually makes me really happy. The problem is it always defaults to top chat. I'm gonna put it on the live chat. It doesn't actually change it because there's not enough people watching. We've got 13 people. Good morning, everyone, and even at the wrong time. Thank you for turning up today. It makes me happy. Let's talk a little bit about the situation with Iran, and then we can maybe look at some of my bookmarks that I have here that I've reserved. But as you guys, all right, so I'm going to go to WAPO, Washington Post. That's I have a subscription there, and so it is my go-to. We talked about Soleimani. All right, how to start this? Well, I guess, you guys have probably seen quite a lot in the way of media coverage anyway, so I don't need to do that much background information. Obviously, Iran is a major regional power in the Middle East. They have influences in a lot of different countries. They are in this next week doing their first ever joint military exercises with China and Russia. They are a major regional power and influencer. They operate generally via proxy organizations such as militias or terrorist groups or other independent operators in order to maintain some distance, some level of plausible deniability when it comes to disassociation. There's a tension between U.S. Forces, who obviously with Trump coming in, again, how much of this background do we really want to get into? I guess I'm kind of big. I'm going to move myself here a little bit because I'm blocking the headline in my own window, which is going to make it harder for you guys to see. So, bam, live on the fly editing. There's production value for you guys. The United States is also vying for influence and presence in the Middle East, oftentimes allied with the interests of Israel in that way, but also pursuing U.S. geopolitical interest in terms of securing oil and putting their finger on the scale in terms of outcomes of what happens in the Middle East in order for economic interests and geopolitical interests. Donald Trump undid a lot of the good that Barack Obama had done, building up the treaty about nuclear denuclearization, so phasing out or tests. There was some deals with the release of funds, and Donald Trump, as you guys probably know, just to be contrarian, to be seen as undoing everything that the Obama administration had done, took a 180-degree different approach to Iran. Whereas Obama was about sort of like bringing aboard allies in Europe and bringing aboard other pressure to try to get Iran to come to the table and negotiate an agreement. Trump threw all that out, unilaterally withdrew, ruined the U.S. reputation once again in terms of being a reliable partner, alienated our European allies, and made things less stable and more dangerous. Trump's thinking, because he has no sophistication, is pretty much brute force. To buy his way out of problems or to bully his way out of problems, intimidate his way out of problems. He has no subtlety about him at all. He has all the subtlety of a loud fart in a quiet room. So he tore up the agreement, escalated tensions with Iran, has been trying to use economic pressures and other ways of distancing Iran from other allies, driving them, closer to Russia and China, whatnot. And obviously, Iran has its own interests in the region, including in Iraq and in Syria and other places. They have been backing militias in Iraq in order to get U.S. troops out, forcing U.S. troops out, and I don't disagree about. I will come to the state-sanctioned assassination, which is a complete misjudgment of error and really a terrible, terrible move on so many levels. Right. So Trump has. Well, there's a lot of reasons we can think of Trump wanting to act precipitously, or things that could motivate Trump to act precipitously in this situation. So he's basically destroyed his relationship, he's destroyed the détente, if you want to use that phrase, maybe, with Iran that existed after Obama, because he wanted to put Iran in a corner and force them to submit, because he, again, has no sense of diplomacy. He also alienated our European allies, apologies, by demonstrating that the U.S. will not keep its word across presidencies, and finds himself alone and isolated. So Iran is also financially in an increasingly desperate situation because of the sanctions and the other pressures that the U.S. that Trump is trying to put on the administration, or in the regime, however you want to call it. What Trump forgets, of course, is that what bullies forget is if you punch somebody in the mouth, just because they stop talking doesn't mean they're not going to come at you again. So Iran supporting a lot of these militia groups around the Middle East, and one of them was in Iraq. They stormed the embassy. There have been, ongoing attacks on the U.S. bases, but Trump used that particular incident of the embassy to as a justification to really, really overreact and respond in a way that nobody outside of his own circle of yes men thought was a good idea. He ordered the assassination, basically, of not like the militia group heads who are carrying out these attacks in Iraq or in Syria or anywhere else in the Middle East. He didn't go after one of the proxy groups for Iran. He went right after a military commander who was in charge of strategic use of force strategically in Iranian interest. So, as WAPO says here, the body of a slain Iranian commander killed in a U.S. drone strike arrived in Iran Sunday as tens of thousands of mourners marched in the streets. Major General Soleimani, commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard's elite Quds force, was targeted by U.S. forces in Baghdad Friday as he left the airport in a 2-car convoy. 8 other people were killed, including al-Muhandis, a powerful Iraqi militia leader. I actually do remember seeing, so that was the end of the WAPO reading, but I do recall seeing that you have there was an attack at the Baghdad airport, and the airport had been shut down, and that was the same attack that killed the Iranian commander. And so I've been listening to some analysis by military officials and intelligence officers, and I think that there was this state-sanctioned assassination. It was a terrible idea. These kinds of state-sanctioned assassinations are terrible ideas for many reasons. Sorry, I had that cough and it made my eyes water, and now my nose is running. You guys didn't need to know that. In my assessment, from what I'm hearing from other people saying, Iran now basically by killing this commander, the Iranians now can have justification for attacking, for retaliation. So the U.S. wasn't really retaliating for any specific, like the whole thing, they're saying they're drawing the line around the embassy and trying to make a direct connection between what happened in Iraq and the Iranian government, and trying to draw a line between there, and also this lame claim that Trump has, that there's been no evidence provided for, that there were attacks imminent, that there was some sort of plan to attack higher ups, which they've not provided any evidence that that's the case. And why would we believe Trump? So a state-sanctioned assassination, the assassination of a state official like this, it does put the U.S., because they didn't even talk to people in Congress about this. So the Democrats are not like, he didn't get the Democrats on board saying, yes, we understand there's an impeachment trial going on. Yes, we have all these differences on issues of policy. However, we are also first, Americans, and national security is the thing that's at stake. And therefore, when it comes to, unity, I mean, I'm not saying the Democrats wouldn't agree. I don't know that he would have been able to get them on board. But a normal, thoughtful, strategic thinking president would have brought in the leaders of both parties from both houses and briefed them and been shown some sort of form of unity. What he has now, of course, is basically he's operating alone, and people in Congress, I mean, obviously the Republicans or sycophants are going to line up behind them, but there's no Democrats who are like, yeah, we thought that this, we were briefed on this, and we stand in unison. So Trump is out domestically on his own. Internationally, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of allies running to his defense and saying this was a brilliant idea and the right strategic move. So internationally, he is alienated. The one person that he's the asset for, Putin, has long-term interests tied up with Iran. And so Putin isn't going to sacrifice his long-term relationship that he's built up and all of the other things, his influence now in Syria because of Trump's betrayal of the Kurds. He's not going to, go and buddy with Donald Trump over Iran when he's got interests in the region. So as a consequence, Donald Trump is out there with his pants down, he's with his butt hanging out. And the other thing is now, because of this strike and because he went at such a high-level person, it justifies, if Iran sees this as empowering them to retaliate when they want, where they want, how they want, and in what, and sort of in what proportion they want. So it's not going to be the case that we're going to see, Iran suddenly mobilize troops or attack the United States directly, because again, they know in terms of power analysis, asymmetrical power, they're financially in a very precarious situation, and they don't want to get into a hot war, a typical traditional hot war with the United States. So in those cases, what do you do when your enemy is more powerful than you are? You attack in other ways. You use asymmetrical warfare tactics, which I've heard people refer to. So it might be a cyber attack. It might be, using militias, stepping up support for terrorist groups against U.S. targets. Again, not Iran directly, but using their proxies to do things, one step removed, to use that plausible deniability. And, Trump has basically invited this. He's opened the door for this, and with no obvious, clear strategic plan going into an election year. So I think, the Iranians are going to look at this. There's no reason for them to retaliate in the next 48 hours or the next 72 hours. They have the time and space to plan their response. And everyone else is just going to kind of wait and read every single, was this the response of Iran? Was that this response of Iran? And Yes, and Trump really is just like what is he going to do? Who is he going to turn to? He's out. He's by himself on this. He's personally anti-war. He's not going to send more troops than he has to. And there's a lot of troops in the Middle East already. To be honest, I think they've sent in like another total of 4,000 more troops. I mean, that's not going to be like an invasion force, obviously. And he also has the problem of if he wanted to do something bigger in Iran, like what W did when after 9/11 invading Iraq. Yeah, let's go after the country that wasn't behind 9/11. Brilliant. But in that case, there's no way the Democrats in Congress are going to authorize the use of force. Certainly, not if Iran operates in an asymmetrical way, especially using proxy groups. So it will be more difficult to justify. So it seems like, at least to me, that Trump had, again, almost like a temper tantrum, an overwrought emotional response when he's in a hypersensitive position. So the attack on the embassy was a little too much like Benghazi. It was a little too much. He's trying to make it into a pride issue. He's not thinking strategically. He wants to try to show force in order to be intimidating. But you can't intimidate a government that that has a long-term existence. Donald Trump, this time next year, might be in the last 2 weeks of his presidency, and the Iranians know this. The Iranians are able to use the calendar as well, and so I would imagine that when it comes, I saw a lot of, people who want to go out and march against state-sponsored violence, like the kind that that Trump is engaged in, the sort of assassinations in that way. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that there's a lot to be critiqued about U.S. foreign policy. I do not think, though, people who are going on, this is going to be World War III, yada, 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 then that, I think, is misunderstanding the Iranian position, what Iran's options are. And it's not going to be like a World War II soldiers meeting on the battlefield kind of thing. Not when they can go after our election. Not when they can go after cyber security or our digital infrastructure somewhere, our power structures. There's so many weaknesses potentially that they have to retaliate that isn't about soldiers and weapons. And they have the time and space to think about those things. So people were saying, again, this is going to deteriorate into a World War III situation. I just don't feasibly think that can happen, mostly because, in all honesty, Donald Trump has no European backing. He has no allies. No one is going to put their troops up to fight this war that Donald Trump... most of Europeans wanted the Iranian nuclear deal. That's what they signed up for. That's what the French and the Germans and the Brits at the time, they all were like, yes, this is a good idea. This is going to bring some stability to this situation. So Donald Trump is out there on his own. I'm going to have a look at what you guys have to say in the chat. I'm going to look at this, see what you guys are thinking, what you think of my take, what you think of your own things. You're taking on your own takes. So Mithril says, even Tucker Carlson criticized Trump thin skin. Like, is that supposed to be like Rumpelstiltskin? Trump thin skin over this. Hey, when you get Tucker Carlson criticizing you, that's a pretty big rebuke in Trump world. And when Trump state television, coffee, is not giving the official line. I've forgotten the name of the Prussian who said, war is politics by different means, but they were spot on. We're once again witnessing desperation politics by a cornered politician. I would agree. There was the movie that happened, I think, in the 1990s, Wag the Dog. I actually never saw Wag the Dog, but I remember the premise of it being they sort of go into a false war to help with the president. You guys have seen that video clip of Trump, I assume, where he is predicting that Obama, in order to get reelected, is going to start a war with Iran because his numbers are so bad and his position is so pathetic. Again, there's a tweet for everything. Donald Trump gives you all the tweets you need to undermine him. He undermines himself. He predicted the failure of his own presidency a decade before it happened. It's amazing. Right. So, Mithril, regardless, this is an extrajudicial killing, therefore Trump has committed a war crime. Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that at all. The problem, of course, is who has the authority to haul him in? That's the problem with the war crimes tribunals, is that the people like him claim immunity because of their leadership position, and there's no international police to take him in. Sorry. The UK is likely to get involved, will be blackmailed in cooperating with the threat of a trade deal when Brexit occurs. I don't even know if that timetable really makes a whole lot of sense, because so I saw Shoe on Head, and you've got a bunch of people who, like Rand Paul, the Tucker Carlson types, who are anti-war and anti-military spending. And on that, I tend to share a similar position with people who are, they're not really doves, are they? I wouldn't call them doves, but they're not interested in using U.S. taxpayer dollars to impose U.S. foreign policy goals through military occupation globally. So the time scale we're looking at here reasonably is Donald Trump is going to be out of office in, we think could possibly be out of office in 12 months' time. It would take half of that amount of time just to negotiate some sort of coordinated European response, or even to bring Britain on board. While he's also being impeached, while he has the State of the Union, while he goes to therapeutic campaign rallies every other week. I just don't see him actually having the time or focus or attention. And there's no long-term goal that he's organizing towards. His idea, again, is just to try to shut someone up by punching them in the mouth with the most obvious thing he knows, which is his fist. And he has no idea about, sliding poison into the mushrooms that are being put out for your appetizers as a way to get back at you. He doesn't, think about how other people could retaliate in response. So he's become a rogue operator. I think that when it comes to, if you're talking about Trump being a rogue operator, he's still being advised by his military. And the military has, from my understanding, when they do an assessment of a situation like this, they give a bunch of options. So Trump isn't thinking on his own. I mean, this is the one maybe ray of hope that there could be coming out of this, is that Trump isn't making foreign policy up on his own. He's being given a menu of choices. And maybe his military advisors, having seen him make a bad choice once it's been put on the menu, in this case, this direct assassination, they might change the options that they present to him a little bit in the future. So, and again, there's a timetable. A military thing, you can't do a big scale military use of force without congressional approval. There's some limits on the executive branch powers to act in a military way before needing congressional authorization and funding. So Trump's not unlimited in his exercise of power here. He is constrained by Congress. And the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi has no interest in helping him, exacerbate a dangerous international situation. It's not in U.S. interests for that to happen. Right. Britain's official response so far, this is Sib Wolf, and thank you, by the way, for paraphrasing. We're just going to trust that you got this right. I just got a lot of trust in my chat. Britain's official response so far, urge Iran to take diplomatic route, de-escalate. Bloody hell, my own government is siding with the temper tantrum of a president. No, I mean, of course Britain is going to, if you imagine Trump coming along and slapping Iran in the face, if that's what you want to sort of portray this as, and Iran's cheek is still very much stinging from the blow. Yeah, it's going to be in Britain's interest to say, hey, he's just drunk. That's my mate. He's a bit of an arse. You should, just, he gets like that sometimes. Just, maybe don't do anything. But we all know that Iran will retaliate. They have to. They are seen as the biggest influencer in the region. And this is why it's so stupid to do a direct attack and not attack the militia leaders. Had Trump killed a bunch of militia leaders, it would not have been nearly as provocative as I think we can all understand. But in this case, it was, the Americans doing a direct attack against Iran. And Iran, as a power broker in the Middle East, has to retaliate. It has to, from their perspective, from their point of view, in order to not be seen as being able to be pushed around by the United States. And they'll have a lot of latitude, I think, in terms of their Russian connections. I don't see Vladimir Putin stepping up to try to de-escalate the situation. From his point of view, the less American influence there is in the Middle East, the more opportunities there is for Russian influence. So Trump's already done a unilateral surrender to Putin on the Kurds, and basically, for the first time since the 1970s, let the Russians just walk in, and even for a while they were taking over American bases. They're just setting up shop in our buildings until the U.S. military had to destroy them before they left in order to not be converted into Russian housing, Russian headquarters. Right? So Putin can, do plenty of stuff with Trump and talk about him without actually helping him with the Iran situation in order to extend Russia's influence in the Middle East as well. Therefore, Donald Jr. and Eric, shooting endangered species, maybe they should lead the charge into Iran. Oh, it's never going to be a president's son or a senator's son. As this Creedence Clearwater revival, I ain't no senator's son. All right, those aren't the people who go to war. What does Jens have to say here? Politics is war by different means. Right. Well, if you, been hearing about Sun Tzu a lot lately and tactics, and if you know Sun Tzu and the Iranians, I'm sure do, you don't take on your enemy and where he's weakest where he's strongest and you're weakest. You try to set up a situation where you can win. So not only has Trump alienated himself internationally with few allies willing to help out in the way that sort of like the world felt, the Western world felt a great deal of sympathy for the United States after 9/11. In fact, because of the attack on the World Trade Center, the building itself was a source of international business and other commerce, and therefore there were people from other countries who also died in the 9/11 attacks. Brits died. I have to, how many countries, how many people? Let's find out. Oh, God, that's not spelled right at all. Pretty cool. Countries, citizens died in 9/11. For those of you who weren't born then. Right. Holy cow. Right, I didn't even know it was that many. More than 90 countries lost citizens in the 9/11 attacks, including the United Kingdom, the Dominican Republic, India. Wow, yeah. And so because of that, Americans and American press tends to Americanize the victims of 9/11. They don't talk about the fact that that many countries had citizens who were personally impacted by the deaths of 9/11. And hey, good morning, Kevin. You're gonna come and type nasty things in my chat to get me demonetized. Thank you. All right, getting back to this serious subject. Sorry. When the 9/11 attacks happened, other countries were personally impacted. The story became not only an American story, but it had a local angle. It had a local death, and it had a local impact. And that created a great deal of goodwill for the United States, which they then leveraged in their negotiations in order to try to get, because if the United States wanted to invade Iraq, they had to go to the UN Security Council, right? And all this stuff takes time. Again, this is why I think that we're not going to see an escalation of any kind of troop versus troop hot war in the next 12 months. He has no allies in the European Union who would even offer troops. And two, he's got a real uphill climb in terms of getting any kind of UN sign-off. And they're not going to act, unilaterally. So Trump he's put himself into a corner internationally. And domestically, he's got his own party. He's got the hawks in his own party standing with him and willing to say whatever he does is great. But there's also some, libertarian types and critics of U.S. spending that much money on foreign policy. And so Trump is not helping himself in getting allies domestically either, by basically not knowing how to president. He doesn't know how to president. So this story sort of, I think, sums it up well. January 5th, this is from yesterday. No, it's from today even. The White House delivered a formal notification of the drone strike that killed Major General Soleimani to Capitol Hill on Saturday, as required under the War Powers Act, according to a senior Democratic aide and another official familiar with the matter. The War Powers Act of 1973 mandates that the president report to lawmakers within 48 hours of introducing military forces into armed conflict abroad. Such notifications generally detail an administration's justification for U.S. intervention, as well as the constitutional and legislative rationale used by the administration to send the troops. It may also include how long the involvement could last. But not under the Trump administration. Sorry, that's not reading. What are you saying? All your vowels. I can see your vowels, Kevin. All right. But the document, which is entirely classified, drew scathing criticism from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who said in a statement that the notification, quote, raises more questions than it answers. She goes on to say, this document prompts serious and urgent questions about the timing, manner, and justification of the administration's decision to engage in hostilities against Iran. The highly unusual decision to classify this document in its entirety compounds our many concerns and suggests that the Congress and the American people are being left in the dark about our national security. She again, unquote. She again demanded that the administration brief lawmakers about the strike and what responses Trump is considering. The Democratic aide and other official spoke on condition of anonymity ahead of the White House's formal notification to Congress, where Soleimani's death has ignited a fresh debate over the president's war powers and Congress's role in authorizing new military action abroad. The formal notification received at Capitol Hill on Saturday is completely classified, according to the senior Democratic aide, and it is unclear whether the administration will issue a non-classified version that can be publicized. The aide said sending a fully classified report when the government has already acknowledged the strike was unusual and called the notification on the Soleimani strike brief and insufficient. In remarks at his resort on Friday, Trump said the Iranian commander was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American personnel abroad, which, if that's the case, they should be able to share that with Congress. All right. What do they think? What happens next? Soleimani's killing could be a catalyst for greater violence, experts warned. Iran vowed severe revenge in response, while U.S. outposts brace for retaliatory strikes and oil prices rose. The U.S. Embassy in Iraq warned U.S. citizens to leave immediately. So that is where we currently are. I think Trump did this without a plan. He's reactive, not proactive. And yeah, we'll see. I did want to say that something I noticed in the Trump, do my search here. He understands, I think Trump now, of course, is reading the press, and he is scared. I'm just going to be honest. I think he's scared that Iran will respond and try to humiliate him, because let's be honest here. They said they're going to, you can't just, the real Donald Trump. Sorry. Yeah, why not? Real Donald Trump in Iran. Okay. So he's clearly feeling a little bit nervous about, he's the bully who's punched someone in the face. And now he realizes that he's opened himself up to a response retaliation and is trying to intimidate his way out of any kind of response. So he's tweeted out here, the U.S. just spent $2 trillion on military equipment. We are the biggest and by far the best in the world. If Iran attacks an American base or any American, we will be sending some of that brand new, beautiful equipment their way and without hesitation. Again, and then we got Shoe on Head. Weirdly, there's a bot that's taken Shoe on Head's picture too. The first response here is actually Shoe on Head. Great. But what this, of course, doesn't take into consideration is that it could be a cyber attack. It could be other forms of attack, not just the sort of limited direct attack that Trump thinks about. And so he's, trying to, what would you say, signal his threats. This is how Trump communicates, right? He does this too. If someone accused him of being a sexual predator, then he'll go on the attack and he'll try to intimidate them. So he writes, they attacked us and we hit back. Yeah, this thing has been going on since like the 1970s. So Trump trying to reinvent history here is a bit crap, which I would strongly advise them not to do. We will hit them harder than they have ever been hit before. Again, big words. He did this with little Rocket Man stuff with North Korea. He's screaming loud because he knows he's actually vulnerable, and he knows that he's trying to intimidate the Iranians into not responding because he doesn't know how they're going to respond. All right, so here we go. Iran is talking very boldly about targeting certain U.S. assets as revenge for our ridding the world of the terrorist leader who had just killed an American and badly wounded many others, not to mention all the people he has killed over. God, Trump is just so poor at sentence construction. He's got to spend so much time justifying himself that it's almost impossible for him to be coherent. So it goes on, blah, 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 blah. Let this serve as a warning that if Iran strikes any Americans or American asset, we have targeted 52 Iranian sites, representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago, some at a very high level and important to Iran and the Iranian culture. And those targets and Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. The U.S. wants no more threats. He's seriously just screeching out like a terrified child at this point. There's so much wrong with this. So again, when it comes about attacks, there have been for a very long time various rocket attacks against the U.S. Embassy for a while in Iraq when there was the insurgency, and now again with the rise of this. So, he could point to literally anything and claim it was Iran. So honestly, this is screeching, in my opinion. And I don't find it very plausible because he's not going to have the backing to do the kinds of things that he's claiming he wants to do here. All right, so you guys are talking about various things. All right, I'm going to move off this because we've got, excellent, 10 minutes left. It's going to be a quick show today. I do have a house guest, and I don't want to abandon him for more than an hour. Got some things to do. Still haven't seen the cathedral in Cologne yet, so gonna go do that on a Sunday because when church going on, that's not going to be at all difficult. But the other thing I guess I wanted to just briefly talk about is, okay, first I'll look at the chat and then we'll see what you guys have to say. My dad is bigger than your dad. Yeah, that's pretty much the best argument that Trump has. Shu's response, Kevin, was to just, it wasn't particularly sophisticated at all. It was, okay, let's read Shu's response because let's see what insightful political analysis does June bring when she decides to virtue signal her Rand Paul-esque anti-war position to her followers. So, oh yeah. Oh, Tim Pool's complete not knowing what an asset is. An asset gives you stuff you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that they do what you want 100% of the time, Tim. My God, why do people give this guy money? Honestly, who gives this guy money? Why are you wasting it at a guy whose opinion is completely worthless? All right. Real Donald Trump. We'll go there. Oh, we don't necessarily need, here, we'll do this one. So now I just need to scroll down again. Yada, yada, yada. Do. Okay, this was the one we were talking about. So Shu's intensely intellectual political analysis was F healthcare, F our veterans, F our crumbling infrastructure, F the homeless. I think she meant homeless. And then all caps screaming, mommy military industrial complex needs more money, hell yeah. I'm not sure why she said mommy military industrial complex, because if anything, people tend to think of mommy issues as the bread and butter, healthcare, education, maybe law and order, whereas daddy issues are like taxes in the military. So she's being sexist, and so there she goes. That's her sophisticated military analysis. I'm not saying that the general points aren't correct. I'm just saying that one, there's no like when it's sexist. June's got to signal her anti-feminism in there by somehow linking spending with women in a misogynistic way. But again, not really any interesting analysis, just rage tweeting. There we go. And then she gets to virtue signal her position so she can get, 7,000 likes in an emotional response from her fandom. There you go. So that's June's really highly thought out intellectual, all caps, mommy military industrial complex needs more money. The fact is that in this case, what he's saying is, $2 trillion on military equipment. I don't even know that in terms of the budget, $2 trillion on the military is even that much. So anyway, I mean, we can have an intelligent discussion about the role of defense spending in terms of national priorities. This isn't a nuanced analysis of that. so there you go, Kev. That was what Shu had to say. The 1984 film threads might be real life. The cost of any given piece or collection of military equipment is fairly unimportant. The U.S. is notorious for overpaying for gear as well as buying a lot of the kit armed forces have no use for. Agreed, there's tons of waste, fraud, and abuse in military spending. We just saw the amount of complete lack of oversight when it came to spending in the Middle East after Iraq and Afghanistan, right? We want to talk about where we need auditors. We don't need as much oversight and regulation of, like, let's say, requiring people who happen to lose their jobs suddenly need to get a drug test to qualify for the state funded or the taxpayer funded unemployment benefit or any kind of state support that they are entitled to by participating and paying their taxes. There's Republicans are willing to have oversight of that, but very little of auditing, independent audits, and fining companies for not doing what they said they're going to do or wasting money when it comes to military spending. The Russians and Iranians are capable of fielding the same level of force in their native theater as the U.S. at much lower cost. Yeah, and if the U.S. would have to actually ship forces over there or move forces around, which would allow plenty of lead time to know what they were doing. Especially if the U.S. is unable to effectively use their European allies to help handle logistics, and who's going to stand with the Trump administration? I mean, he's ticked off Merkel. He's got Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson has got bigger problems right now to deal with than becoming Trump's lapdog. And Macron has no interest. I mean, the French and the Iranians have a much longer diplomatic history than the United States. Was it normal to have those evangelicals surround Trump? Oh, he's going back to his safe. I don't want to disparage the idea of safe spaces, but he runs to his safety blanket of validation and praise whenever he does stuff. So yeah, this is him really, showing his weakness, if anything, because he wanted to go and have adulation after this. Just shows he doesn't have confidence in his own actions. Hums for the harmless. Yeah, I'm not going to drag June too much for typos. I mean, I'll laugh at it the one time, but I make lots of typos on Twitter, so, I'm not going to drag her too hard for that. Home for everyone. The fundies are going to be Trump's meat shield. Well, I mean, that's what the soldiers who need the money or want to go to college or formerly want to use the military as a pathway to citizenship. It's a leveraging point on the working classes and the poor classes to fight to protect the interests of the moneyed classes, isn't it? That's kind of same as it ever was, if I'm honest. Right. Oh my gosh, 37 people. Good morning, y'all. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up. Get going. As I said, my house guest is leaving. this evening, and there's a couple things that we want to do before he heads out. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is there anything? No. Oh, I guess I've got the chat in the way, so you guys can't really see yourselves. And I know that that's what you really come here to see, is you come here to see yourselves on the screen. The whole ContraPoints thing. I want to talk about why I'm not going to talk about it, or why I'm not going to at least talk about it now. First of all, I'm relatively new to the issues of the trans community. So it's only been, let's say, in the last 2 or 3 years that, probably since since 2020 technically, but it's really only been since 2016 that trans issues were something that came onto my radar. And then I kind of felt I knew enough about it to start to be an ally or try to speak up on behalf of trans rights and trans issues. And that's where I see myself and my role generally, is when I see transphobia, or when people are confronting it, to talk about it and to be an ally to trans people. And because I'm sort of these issues and non-binary people, I know some non-binary people, but not that many non-binary people, so I don't have a great exposure to a lot of different views. Whereas because the trans community has had quite a number of spokespeople or people on channels, there's a whole discussion that's been happening for decades before I showed up. And that's kind of where I feel like when the discussion that's happening with ContraPoints and about ContraPoints isn't on a rights issue, or in terms of a legislative issue or a political issue, a campaign issue, a religious right issue. Those are all areas where I feel comfortable pushing against the religious right, again, when they try to say gender is a binary and there's some sort of hierarchy that God ordained a natural blah, blah, blah. I feel very comfortable in those conversations pushing back on that nonsense. When it comes to debates inside the LGBTQIA community, the discussion that's happening between and amongst trans and non-binary people, people who have around gender identities in that way. One, I'm cis, so I bring nothing to the conversation, in that internal conversation. I have nothing to say on that part of it from my own experience. That means that I'm pretty much left listening to people on different sides of the issues, listening to different people's, not necessarily sides, but different people's take on various issues. And there I see my role less as being unless I see something, an example would be the guy who did the women in sports. Why am I blanking on his channel's name? I want to say Rationality Rules, but I don't think that that's it. But anyway, when that came up with the whole atheist community of Austin and all that, that was again here are things that are just factually wrong. Here's someone who's transphobic. The atheist community should be looking at the science and also combining that with humanism. So I felt more comfortable having that conversation. When it comes to what's been going on with ContraPoints and her association with Buck Angel and the response on Twitter, and then her response to the response on Twitter in particular, where she got criticized in the types of criticism. And now she's made the whole other video about cancel culture. I'm listening to people who are very much defenders of Natalie and who are looking at critiques of her video and critiquing the critiques. I'm also listening to, I respect Chrisiosity immensely. And if she has concerns, I have a lot of time for hearing those concerns out. I know that other people who are non-binary, Essence of Thought, had some critiques on the ContraPoints video. Again, someone I have a lot of time for, and who I generally consider a very thoughtful person who doesn't say things precipitously. So their view is one that I would want to hear out. So there's a conversation about the conversation around ContraPoints and her views, and I just feel like that's without being, as a cis, mostly straight, woman, I just don't feel like, one, I have anything interesting to say on the topic, and two, my role is much better as, it was rationality rules. Okay, thanks, Matt. I just feel like I should STF you and listen to what other people say. So I did see that Dusty Smith on the podcast had a critique of ContraPoints, or Natalie's framing of it as cancel culture. So actually Cog and I have had this discussion last night, because he's a bit more sympathetic to her position, and he watched the video as well, which I haven't had time to do. But Dusty's critique there was, what's being complained about, what she's complaining about, is a subset of Twitter users who behave in an abusive way, and who act in this way that you should not talk to this person, screw this person, block that person out, you shouldn't work with them, whatever else, to the point of not just expressing an opinion, but being harassing. I'm sorry for my cough, you guys. I'm going to wrap this up soon. And that's not cancel culture. So it seemed to me, and again, I haven't watched the video yet, but that kind of critique of like what you're describing here is really not so much cancel culture, because Natalie's not been hurt by a cancel culture, as Dusty proved by looking at her Patreon and her views. After being so-called canceled, her donations are up, her praise is up, her interactions are up, and her views are up. So she hasn't been canceled. What she has been, and he uses the phrase, is trashed, but is because he has a really high tolerance for people being abusive online. I would actually go one further. I think there's a difference between criticizing someone, just trashing them, and then trashing to the point of being abusive. And if her concern was the trashing to the point of being abusive, well, then the video should have been about online abuse and abusive tactics. Because again, the cancel culture thing, as at least Dusty points out, feeds into the right-wing narrative. So, I do need some soup. And, I've been out about in the winter a lot more, and I've been exposed to, like going out to restaurants and stuff. And I'm sure they wash the glasses and everything, but I'm always worried at this time of year if I'm going to pick something up. So that's all to say, I'm listening a lot. Someone DM'd me like, what's your take on the ContraPoints video? And I was like, I haven't watched it, so I don't actually have one. But I am listening to other people's opinions, and it will be interesting to see how this conversation plays out. But again, I don't feel like this is something I have anything to contribute to, and I am not in a position to be judging. Not in terms of like in personal assessment. Like I think that the whole Dusty thing, like the terms and the concepts and are you defining your things correctly, that's more like an academic critique. Have you the thing that you're complaining about, is the clear definition of it the same thing as in your title? And so anyway, so I'm gonna see how it plays out. I know Chrisiosity is toying with the idea of making a video, which I would certainly watch, and I will eventually get around to actually watching the video, but I've been really, really busy with New Year's and hosting people and organizing things, so an hour and 40 just hasn't been something that hasn't been something I've been able to just focus on. So Natalie says, I'm mixed on the video. I don't dislike her, but she could have been better on certain points. I've kind of getting that feeling, actually, Natalie, like people who are criticizing ContraPoints, Natalie, aren't always coming from a place of hate. Even people who are like, who are side-eyeing her still like her body of work, but are on this issue, like, you haven't convinced me. And that's what's going to happen when you put out a YouTube video. Sorry, you just can't avoid that kind of reaction. So, I think that it's not like a black or white thing. Mithril, as per usual, the left proves the thing we're really good at is arguing amongst itself. Yeah, although I think with any diverse group, you're going to get that anyway. And I thought that EOC wasn't the greatest person. I don't know who that was. Sorry, who is EOC? I forget. Natalie says, I'm just annoyed that people are ignoring nuance, so nobody really listens to me when I have a position that doesn't agree with either side fully, even though I'm non-binary. Yeah, that's, I think, a fair point to make, that there should be a range of responses available and we should be listening to people. All right. I see Cog is actually in the chat from my living room. Thank you, Cog. Perhaps get a nice bowl of soup. I will try that. Natalie, nuance is difficult if it requires a considered and thoughtful response, something that doesn't happen often in the Twitter age, especially not on Twitter. You can have more space on Facebook to make those longer posts. But on Twitter especially, even if you do a thread, it's pretty hard to have an intellectual conversation on Twitter, and especially difficult to have nuanced ones that don't get people all emotional. All right, so not enough characters, absolutely not enough. Only academics can get away with making content about content they won't make content on. Yeah, read between the lines, Cog, right there. I'm not going to take you to the cathedral after this. No, I will. Essence of Thought. Yeah, Essence of Thought wasn't the greatest person. I think that there are people who have disagreements with Essence of Thought, and there are other people who think that they make really good points, and that's probably true of us all. We all have things that other people will agree and disagree with us about. I think generally, it is good to remember that an ally is an ally, and even if you disagree with an ally, I think it's good to talk to them with the hope of getting them to see your position and acknowledge it, even if you don't get them to change your mind. Like when I had a disagreement with somebody about Bernie Sanders on Twitter yesterday, I'm like, well, look, you're in Britain, you can't vote for him in the primary. I know I'm not going to vote for him in the primary, so we're just gonna stop this conversation now, because I don't see this being very productive. And like 3 hours later, they were not stalking me, but they were like on an unrelated thread. They couldn't put it down. They couldn't let it go. Like, no, what about this thing you said? And I'm like, so when you've got somebody who's an ally, like, again, having that goal of, if you can't get them to agree with you, at least like acknowledge where your position is, and not making a friend into an enemy if you don't have to. I mean, there are some things on principle where you can't compromise, and people are like that, and I think that's probably on some issues really good. But doing it too much is you're just going to push away the people that you need to work with on a lot of other issues. So, do people explode on Twitter then try to heal on YouTube? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. What I do know is that I really need a wee. I am dying here, guys, and so I'm going to wrap it up really, really shortly, because I've drank so much coffee this morning, and I said I was going to do an hour show, and I've gone 7 minutes over, so you guys have had all the time you need. You've had all the Christy you're going to get for this day, but I am on holiday. I might do a couple more shows. I know, like I said, I want to reach out to Kevin about doing another happy hour. I might do some weekday winter stuff, because I haven't talked to you guys for a while. It feels like I've been away. But more than anything, I really need to end the show, because I'm in physical pain at this point. So all I'm going to say is that thank you guys for coming by an hour early. Or if you've missed it, go back and watch it now, because we normally start broadcasting now. Thank you to the people in the chat, including my co-host Kevin Logan, whom I hope I'll have back on this channel in the next 24 hours or so. I want to say hi to all my regulars. Hope that things are going better in Australia. Natalie, thank you for Mithril and HK and all of you lovely, lovely people for showing up. I'm going to try to do some great content for you in 2020. And until next time, I have been Christy, guys. You have all been absolutely awesome. Big hugs, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to each other again really soon. Bye, y'all. Oh, now I gotta do the 2-button thing. I timed this poorly. All right, now goodbye.